Today, I find myself in Tallahassee, Florida, having the pleasure to visit Mission San Luis Living History Museum, a place that preserves the story of where the Spanish and the Apalachee Native Americans cultures mixed and mingled in the late 1600s and early 1700s. Come along with me as I discover a fascinating, riveting, yet often forgotten chapter of our American history. That's coming up next.
The reason that we know about how this building looks is because in 1704, everything on the mission was burnt down. And that's because the English were coming into this territory. And the Spanish are mortal enemies with the English. And they said, we do not want them to have anything. So they had council with their chief, and they decided, in order to make sure that this whole territory doesn't get taken over by the English, which would not have been a good idea, they decided, sadly, to burn everything down. So they burnt down this council house. The Apalachee burnt all of their homes. They even burnt all of their field crops. And they just gathered whatever was important to them, and they left. And when our archaeologists came in, when you burn trees this big, and they're made of pine, they leave a really nice residue. So every single post that you see is exactly where the posts were before this building burnt down. So this is reconstructed exactly where it originally was. And we know exactly the diameter of all of the posts and exactly where they were, and even the location of these smudge pots that are underneath the barbacoas.
So the smudge pots for mosquitoes or what?
Yeah, so when you are in here and it is the middle of summer, even in the middle of winter there's bugs, the Apalachee came up with the idea of putting little smudge pots underneath of the barbacoas. So what that does is you put a mat on top of here, and you make you don't make a fire, but you put something in there with some coals that's going to smoke. And the smoke will create a nice barrier underneath your seat or your bed if you're sleeping, and it will just allow the bugs not to attack you while you're having a council meeting, so you're not distracted by trying to swat bugs away. And there's also going to be the fire. So there's lots and lots of smoke in here, and the men like to smoke tobacco, so there's all the tobacco smoke in here. I can imagine it's very, very smoky when there's a council meeting. So.
Did they burn like the Spanish moss type things, or
Mm-hmm.
yeah?
Anything that would smoke. So we use Spanish moss, corn cobs are really popular, dried pine needles, any kind of just dried, more full stuff.
Yeah.
So a corn cob is really dense, so it'll smoke for a long time.
For smoldering, okay.
Yeah.
So I know this is the council house. Did the Apalachees have any other use for it besides council? And were like the Spanish ever invited to come in and do business in here?
Yes, it's a public building as well as a private building. So whenever there's council, it's private unless you're invited to the council, which was a big deal. The Spanish are sometimes invited to the council if there's something important that needs to be discussed. That has to do with them. And then whenever there's not council, those back barbacoas along the back wall are for travelers. So say you came from San Augustine or you came down from Cuba and you're still traveling and you need a place to stay, the Apalachee will allow you to stay in here. They'll feed you, they'll take care of you. Not like, you know, take care of you, but they'll just make sure that you get what you need, make sure you have food, fresh water, and if you need anything, then the merchants come into the plaza and you can purchase anything that you need for the rest of your journey. Or perhaps you're just waiting for your home to be built here. You can stay here and wait for that.
Cool.
I wonder how many people could be in here.
About 1,200. Yeah. And historically, there are about 1,400 Apalachee that are living on the site, and about a couple hundred Spanish families are here. And this isn't even the largest Apalachee area. There's the capital city is the Apalachee city of Chuco, and it's about 50 miles to the east, and they have 3,000 Apalachee living there. Their council house is even bigger than this. And it is an archaeological site, but you can't visit it. So imagine this building
Even
bigger. And it's just a reflection of the population.
Right.
But no one lives in here permanently. It's just a space for the council meetings and for travelers to come and have a safe space to stay. And for ceremony and all sorts of other things throughout the year.
Do they know how long it took them to build it?
No, we actually have no idea about the time frame it took to build it. We don't know how they built it. Were you guys here when I was talking about the pine? So
the burn pine?
okay, so that's how they
Reconstruct.
yeah, they reconstructed it after it was burnt down, but the closest pine forest to this mission is 20 miles away.
Wow.
And these are old growth, longleaf pine.
Right.
These are dense, huge, heavy trees.
Yeah.
So
Right.
we don't know how they got them back to the site, but the Apalachee are historically about 6 feet tall, and they're just incredibly intelligent. I mean, they are skilled with hunting, crafts, woodworking. I mean, they just
Did it all.
artwork. They can do everything. So it doesn't matter how they did it. I know that they did it.
Right.
So we can assume that they possibly floated them in the rivers, because there are a lot of rivers and creeks in this area, and maybe they knew that, you know, the times of year when the water was highest, so they could be able to float the logs, or
Right.
they could float them and pull them with ropes,
Right.
or, you know, have some sort of rolling system with logs, but
Right.
we're still not sure.
Incredible.
I know. Because you see these going that way and these going this way. To kind of lock them in and
Yeah.
it's just awesome.
Yeah, and they thatch the outside of the building with palm, and all of the palm is actually down at the coast. So it's
Right.
about a day's worth of travel to get down there. But once they're down there, they just harvest, you know, as much as they can. I mean, it's probably millions of pine leaves that they get, or palm leaves,
Yeah.
and then they just bring them back in baskets and carts and work on rethatching. And they're constantly doing this. Historically, there's always fire in here, so there's something that could light on fire or just smoke damage. Things dry out, and maybe someone throws something through the ceiling. You
Or
never know what could
winds,
happen.
Yeah, tornado winds, anything.
Yeah,
Blow
wind.
through it, yeah, blow through it and stuff. So.
So then that sounds like this is a pretty water resistant building, except for the center where, of course, there was a hole.
Yeah, absolutely. The palm is completely waterproof. It has this natural waxy coating on it, so if you use it as your roof, you will not get dry unless you're directly in the center. But honestly, if there's a fire, you're not getting wet. You know, this fire is going to be about 10 feet wide, so it's going to be incredibly keep the whole building dry. It's going to be really important. Did you all have any other specific questions I could answer?
No.
One question I had is, I'm really curious about the clothes you're wearing. Can you tell me anything about the different pieces of clothing that you have on? Because it looks cool.
So
Thank you.
Hi. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you.
So I actually portray a real woman who lived here. Her name was Juana Rodriguez. She was a mestiza woman, and she was part Timucuan, which is another tribe in the area, and she was part Spaniard. So until the Spanish arrived, most of the native women are wearing deerskin clothing. They're wearing things woven out of Spanish moss, palm, really simple, natural clothing. And when the Spanish arrive, pretty much all of the people convert to Christianity. And it becomes very important for women to wear modest clothing. So even though I am part native, I am wearing clothing that would be traditionally Spanish style. So a bodice, long sleeve linen, and long skirt, apron, and I'm a farmer as well, so I would be wearing this in the fields, and possibly something maybe a little lighter, but it's also colder year round, so it's less burdensome to wear all of this clothing historically than it is now. And even now, we do not wear all of the layers that all of the women and men would have worn. You know, especially Spanish women, they would have worn knee-high stockings, they would have worn boots, they would have worn multiple petticoats, aprons, bodice, they would have had something over their shoulders, they would have had a long mantilla. They have so many layers. And stays, and a bodice, stays are basically the precursor to a corset. So lots and lots of layers, but it makes sense for the time. And that was just, modesty was very important. So covering your hair,
Sure.
especially if you're a married woman, making sure you do not show your elbows, that's a really big one too. And just covering up as much skin as you can.